In the early 2000s, Germany was on another level when it came to performance saloon cars. At the turn of the century, German auto manufacturers began experimenting with different engine configurations and different sizes. Prior to electrification, hybridization, and even forced induction, the way you got more power was by increasing displacement or adding more cylinders. And no one knew this lesson better than Volkswagen Audi. Take, for example, the W engine configuration. Bore out 16 cylinders, slap 4 turbochargers, and put it inside the fastest road-going car ever in 2005, and you have the Bugatti Veyron. Chop off 4 cylinders and 2 turbos, and you have the Bentley Flying Spur W12. Now take off the turbos from that, and you have the W12 that's inside the Volkswagen Phaeton or the Audi A8. Slice off another 4 cylinders and you're left with a paltry W8 that can be put in something as small as a Volkswagen Passat per se. So you can imagine if one manufacturer starts doing something, others are going to follow. Mercedes took their massive 6.2-liter naturally aspirated V8 and slapped it inside their smallest sedan, the C-Class, and BMW took their, at the time, race-inspired V10 and slapped it inside the E60 M5 and M6. So what does a high-revving, naturally aspirated V10 have to do with the F10 M5? Well, if you're familiar with BMW's pedigree with M cars, you'll know that the M5 is positioned as an athlete in a well-tailored suit. So what happens when you take out a raucous, unreliable, and visceral V10 and slap 2 turbos and knock off 2 cylinders? Well, unfortunately, that signified the end of the German engine wars of the early 2000s. Now, while there was no true winner of the engine competition wars, BMW certainly did not concede their power figures when it came to the F10. So what we'll be reviewing today is the 2014 BMW F10 M5 with the competition package. Now, I'll go more in detail about the competition package and what all that entailed, but let's first start off by talking about what the F10 introduced in BMW's lineup. Now, typically when BMW introduces a new 7 Series, it's to signify a shift in design language for the brand. Case in point, the rapidly appreciating Bangle-era E65 7 Series. For as long as I could remember, the E65 7 Series was the worst 7 Series ever designed. And there's good reason for that hate, but I'll have to say that for another video. The M5, however, is BMW's way of showcasing new performance technologies, and the F10 is no exception. The F10 is the first M5 with a dual-clutch transmission, as well as the first M5 to have forced induction. So now having a better idea of how the M5 impacts M philosophy, let's take a quick look at what's underneath the hood. So now under the hood, let's talk about the power plant that is the heart that makes this M5 tick. That might have been a poor choice of words. Sorry, I didn't mean to scare any of you S63 owners out there with injector or lifter tick, but I digress. In front of me, like I just mentioned, is the S63 TU, which is a 4-liter hot V twin turbo V8. Hot V just means that the turbos are on the inside of the V rather than on the outside with the manifolds. It's a little bit difficult to visualize, so I'll just put a quick picture up here to compare that versus, say, the S55 that has the turbos on the outside. Now, moving back to the S63, let's talk about numbers. Unveiled in 2011, it was featured in a few different cars, including the E70 X5M, E70 whatever X6M, and the M5 and M6. At launch, this engine had 553 horsepower and 502 pound-feet of torque. If you got it in the competition trim, however, it had 567 horsepower, but in 2014 with the facelift, they increased the competition package up to 591 horsepower. Now, on the mention of the competition package, what else did that offer? Of course, with the power bump, that also includes an increase in the handling characteristics with a revised damper, anti-roll bar setup, some lowering springs and bushings. That lowered the car about 10 millimeters. So it's a little bit lower than the stock M5, but it's a pretty subtle difference. I will note as well that this car is actually on KW coilovers, the V4s, so this isn't on stock suspension anymore. In terms of mods, the owner hasn't done anything outside of the suspension. There is a set of 10 mil spacers, but no power mods, no cosmetic mods. This car is very stock exactly how I like it. M5 is not the only performance sedan, of course, otherwise we wouldn't have the competition like Mercedes and Audi. Starting off with Mercedes, we have the W212 E63 and later E63S. At launch, that had a naturally aspirated 6.2 liter V8, putting around 500 odd horsepower, 550, something like that. But they later introduced a twin turbo V8, which decreased displacement down to 5.5, and that had a power figure of 590 horsepower and 561 pound-feet of torque. From there, we move on to Audi. While we didn't get the RS6 here in America, the RS7 would be the next competitor. And while yes, it does technically compete more directly with the M6 Gran Coupe, I'm just going to include it here because they're all the same car. The C7 RS7 has a 4-liter twin-turbo V8, putting out 553 horsepower and 516 pound-feet of torque. Of course, that has all-wheel drive, as did the Mercedes, whereas the M5 only was offered in rear-wheel drive. Finishing off this list, I want to throw in a little bit of a curveball, and that's going to be Jaguar. You've noticed a few Jags on the channel recently, and that is the XFR-S. The XFR was a little bit of a second-rate supercar saloon in this category, so Jaguar made a special run of about 100 units with the S that had a 5-liter supercharged V8 putting out 550 horsepower and 502 pound-feet of torque, and I believe that was only offered in rear-wheel drive. Let's move on to 0 to 60 times. The XFR-S had a 3.9 0 to 60. The RS7 in all-wheel drive had a 3.5 0 to 60. The W212, I assume with 4MATIC, had a 3.5 0 to 60. And this M5 with the competition package will do 3.6 0 to 60. All in all, considering this is a rear-wheel drive vehicle, I'm very surprised to see it's within 0.1 seconds of the RS7. I'll put those figures up on screen now, so if you want to pause that, you can take a look at them side by side. So now that we finished talking about what's under the hood, let's talk about what surrounds this beautiful power plant and talk about the exterior. All right, now talking about the exterior of the F10 M5. Coming off the heels of a revolutionary design by Bangle with the E60, and in my opinion, the better looking, evolutionary design of the F90. In the middle is the F10, where it's neither revolutionary or evolutionary. It's sort of a blend between the two, and so people don't necessarily have as extreme of an opinion. And that's why, at least again in my opinion, the F10 doesn't get the appreciation and love that it deserves. However, up until this last generation, you have to remember that the M cars are supposed to be an enthusiast's vehicle. You're not supposed to necessarily see the difference between a normal F10 535 and an M5 unless you're a true enthusiast. And to back up this claim, the great Jeremy Clarkson said it so himself. The M5 is supposed to be a little bit lower, a little bit sleeker, a little bit wider, and a whole lot of bit faster.
There are slightly swollen arches, fractionally bigger air intakes, and a set of subtle vents in the wings. But overall, it looks like the 520 that your dentist drives. They may look quiet and unassuming, but they go like a stabbed badger.
So while the M5 focuses on performance, it's still a luxury vehicle at the end of the day. Let's hop into the interior and talk about some of the features that you got for a $100,000 vehicle back in 2014. All right, now on the inside of the F10 M5. Going back to what I said earlier from the great Jeremy Clarkson about the M philosophy. Generally, the exterior should be fairly subdued and very subtle so that only enthusiasts know. However, the inside is typically the opposite. You want to know that you're driving an M vehicle. And so the F10 does a great job at doing that, starting off right here in the middle. Now, while this isn't BMW's first dual clutch in an M car, that accolade goes to the E90 and E92 M3. BMW has since put this in a multitude of models, including their M3s, 4s, M2s. So if you got a performance BMW and you couldn't get a manual, or you decided to opt out for a manual, you got the dual clutch. Now, prior to the dual clutch, if you weren't lucky enough to get a manual in the E60, you had the SMG. The SMG is now very infamous for its pretty subpar ability to be a transmission. In reality, it's not horrendous. It's not the greatest experience, but I will say that the dual clutch is a much more usable, livable transmission, especially in a car of this caliber. Moving on through the cabin, this car is laden with features, as you would expect for a $100,000 vehicle even back in 2014. Some notable features we have in this example in particular are the upgraded ventilated seats as well as massaging. It has the rear heating as well as the sunshades. I believe that's under the executive package. It doesn't have the extended leather or the Bang & Olufsen sound system, but I don't blame you. For $4,000 and I believe $1,200 respectively, those are expensive options that in reality are not very necessary. I will say that the Bang & Olufsen sound system is great, but Harman Kardon in this configuration is pretty decent too. Again, being that this is an executive luxury saloon, we also have Alcantara up on the headliner as well as extended leather on all the touch points. There is still some harder plastics up on the lower parts of the dashboard, but what can you do? I would rather it be this fake plastic where it doesn't shrink in the summer, because seeing that this is now a 12-year-old vehicle, a lot of that leather ends up drying out and it doesn't look great. Now, while this isn't the first M5 to have iDrive, this has the upgraded NBT over the CIC of the pre-facelift and the CCC in the E60. NBT, I am very familiar. You know it, you love it. It's a great platform. It's a great system. It is a little aged at this point, but it has all of the features that you might need. It has your TPMS, your trip computer, pre-ventilation, all that sort of stuff. Now, while I didn't check if this car has a dipstick, if it's anything like the other F chassis generation cars, BMW moved the oil level check inside the infotainment, which is unfortunate, especially if that sensor fails. But overall, it's a fairly reliable system, especially if you're familiar with newer BMWs. It's a pretty easy process. Last thing I want to talk about up here in the gauge cluster, this is probably one of the first iterations in BMW where they used a half digital, half analog gauge cluster. And of course, this also being an M car, it has the yellow and red warning lights for when the car is cold, telling you not to rev it past a certain point. And last thing I'll touch on up here at the front is going to be driver ergonomics. As always, I am 5'9", about 200 pounds right now. These seats are incredibly comfortable and incredibly bucketed. I want these in my 7 Series, and I've actually thought about that, bringing a F90 seat into my G12. But BMW has always put great M seats in their M cars over even just the normal M Sports, like a 535 or a 550. We have tons of configurability, including the leg bolster, side bolster, back, as well as the massaging, like I mentioned. These also are contours, so you can move just the top half. And inside the M embossed headrest, you have these little earlets. Like on an airplane, you can adjust them to keep your head straight in the middle. While it does have digital instrumentation on the bottom, the important bits are analog, like your speedometer and tachometer. We have a heads-up display up front, my favorite M Sport steering wheel in front. It has these skinnier flappy paddles indicating that it's an M car. So now that we finished up here in the driver's seat, let's move on to the back and see what comfortability is like inside the rest of the F10 M5. Now behind myself in the rear of this F10 M5, I am very comfortable back here. The seats are exceptionally supple. Like most cars, not a lot of people sit in the back, so we can really see the condition of this leather and what it was like when it was brand new. The best way you can tell that is by the inside of the armrest. This leather looks like it has never been exposed to the sun, and it is so extremely supple. Talking about comfortability though, sitting behind myself, in my driving position, I don't have as much room as I was expecting. I was expecting maybe 2 or 3 more inches of leg room, but headroom is pretty good. I'd say that's about, 3 inches. And then if I lean back, I can adjust my headrest as well. Now, of course, to be even more comfortable, BMW included some peasant blockers, which keeps the sun out very, very well as some heated seats for when it gets below 70 degrees here in Texas. as well as 4-zone climate control back here. I also have some adjustable reading lights, which actually look better than the ones in my G12. They remind me a lot of an airplane reading light. Outside of that though, the word Spartan does not cross my mind at all. It is very comfortable back here. I do wish the back of these were a little bit softer or maybe wrapped in leather, though it seems like they used a softer plastic rather than the harder ones that are on the lower parts of the dashboards. Again, I'm just looking for something to be picky back here, but surprisingly comfortable. Again, as a full-size adult or slightly above average size for an adult, I'm very comfortable. I would be very comfortable back here on a road trip. So on that note, let's hop back in the driver's seat and see what it's like to drive the 2014 BMW M5. All right, driving the F10 M5 competition. Now, I've always wanted to review an M5, regardless of generation, but the F10 in particular is in a special place. I say this for every car, but it is truly in a special place because this was probably the car that I grew up on, and a lot of my friends grew up on seeing very successful people drive. This was my step below a Ferrari, but not necessarily a Porsche. If you wanted a high-performing luxury sedan that gave you the power, the flexibility of carrying your family around, this was the car to do it. Now, I can recall a time where a friend of mine, his dad had the 550 and later then traded it in for an M5. And my God, was that thing fast. I mean, I think I was 10 at the time, and just getting into cars and the absolute power, the waves that you could just see the excitement in my friend's dad and how much he enjoyed the car over the 550, because the 550 was even more restrained. It didn't have the full fat, almost 600 horsepower from a car that was a fraction the cost of a Ferrari 458 at the time. And to now be driving one 15, 16 years later, it's all come full circle. And so driving impressions, again, this is at the end of the day a 12-year-old car. It is a little bit louder than what I was expecting. I guess because this probably doesn't have the dual glazed windows, a little bit less sound insulation, it being an M car. I was expecting it to be a little bit quieter. Now, something that is of note is that the tires on this car are actually Pilot Sport S5s, the brand new replacement for the 4S. And so I will say that the tire noise is actually exceptionally quiet. The ride quality is great, and the grip is phenomenal. So I'll have to do a comparison versus some 4Ss, but the KWs, the V4s that I mentioned earlier, are doing a ton of work on this 4,500-pound vehicle. It's keeping it exceptionally flat. The handling is very, very compliant. And so what I'm curious about is how the power steering works, because I know it's electronic, but I did see a power steering fluid reservoir underneath the hood. Now, this is where this car belongs, on the highway. I'm not going to be doing too much back road driving today, if any, because you would have already seen that in the POV video. So if you want to go check that out, you can check that up in the corner after this video. On the highway, this car is very compliant. I'm sitting at highway speeds in 7th gear at 1800 RPM. The dual clutch is a much more usable transmission, like I mentioned, over the SMG of the previous generation. I would feel very comfortable driving this for multiple hours on end, hundreds of miles in any sort of road trip or longer commute. On the note of fuel efficiency, I would be very curious to know how much this sits at, because the average that I'm reading right here is about 16 mpg, which I guess for an M car kind of makes sense. Give it some beans here. Oh my goodness. When those turbos kick in, man, does it hit you like a wave. It's crazy how this power plant feels versus the N63 and the G12. Even in just drive, I don't have it in sport or anything. I mean, I'll put it in sport here and downshift it. Look at it. Oh my God. It's just a tsunami of torque. My God, this car this truly is a dream come true for me. I know the F10 is very underappreciated right now. If you're looking for one, the prices are so good right now. You can get them cheaper than an equivalent F80 or F82 M4. And I would 100% go for this. If you want any ounce of luxury more than what a 3 or a 4 Series offers, the M5 is the answer. That's when you know you've matured as a car enthusiast. You can become financially irresponsible by going for a 911, but genuinely, if you need something that's a little bit practical and still performs well, this is the car to get. My butt's being massaged, my back's being ventilated, my ears are being blessed with the sound of that wonderful twin turbo V8. Oh my gosh, it's so tight, it's so taut. I know it's gonna waft in the corners, but on the highway, if you just want that little bit of extra oomph that a 7 Series can't give you, you need an M5, 100%. Oh my goodness, I freaking love this thing. And I'll just briefly mention, this car has 157,000 miles on it. Being that it's a competition with the Power Boost, that's very impressive. And man, what a power plant it is. The S63 is just now being phased out with the S68, but I'm sad to see this engine go. You know, I don't like the 48 volt systems. I don't like hybrids. So if this is the best BMW can do with the twin turbo V8 for the M cars, then so be it. This is not a bad swan song to end on. So with that, let's move on to final thoughts and conclusions, and we will close this video out. And so what are my thoughts on the 2014 BMW M5 competition? Well, driving a 7 Series every day, this makes me yearn for an M car. I think oftentimes people overhype the M3s and M4s because as a younger enthusiast, that's what we see as most flashy. What you don't realize is that an M5 is going to give you the same levels of performance while still maintaining the level of luxury, the level of quality that we've seen from BMW. Now, I can't say with certainty that that's going to continue to be the case, as if you've seen my review on the G61 5 Series, I wasn't really a fan of that car, and when you go back to the F chassis BMWs, this was a great time blending technology with analog and still providing a good level of driving experience. You have to remember, when this car first came out, there was a lot of heavy criticism because people said that it took away from the driving experience more than it added. This M5 was the first one to get rid of hydraulic steering. It added a dual clutch transmission, forced induction. And so sure, in a vacuum, you can say that it took away from the driving experience. It's not nearly as raw or visceral as the E60 M5, but it's more refined, it's more insulated, it's more reliable, and it's more consistent. And so when you're looking for that supercar performance, refinement, class, and you need 2 seats in the back, the M5 is not what you want, it's what you need. Before you all go, I'd be curious to know, what's your ranking of all the M5s? Personally, I'd probably have to put this around 3rd, maybe 4th place, but you'll have to guess which one is my top in a future video. And so with that, I want to say thank you so much for sticking till the end here. If you want to check out some of our other reviews, you can check that playlist out here. And if you like this style of content and you want to stay up to date when we post new videos, you can press subscribe here. As always, I'm your host Donovan of Eurofever Garage. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time. Bye.